Hello guys, Nick here, doing videos from the phone, which is all I can do at the moment. Well, recording the phone, that would be normal, but I can only upload single takes on the phone, so expect bloopers during the video. Quick update before we start this video. First of all, I've actually decided to do reactions to films and TV episodes of things that I wanted to do reviews of. But can't due to the computer being broken, so I can't edit. So I can, what I thought I could do is I could do these single take reactions to the film. So I'm actually going to go and watch, and TV shows, I'm going to watch Spider-Man Far From Home later today. So whilst I can't review it just yet, well I could review it, but I can't edit or upload it. Unless you had the single takes, and I think we all agree we want the full review for everything. But I could do a reaction to it tomorrow, perhaps. Maybe one later today. So, see there. Did I say Homecoming or Far From Home? If I said Homecoming, I meant Far From Home. But if I said Far From Home, I got the right one. I could also do a quick one for yesterday before we go. And also on the Retro channel, I'll do the films and the last two Doctor Who episodes I've seen as well. So... yeah, but that's just a quick update. Might do another quick update later, but first, the topic of this video is Bond 25 news, what we've had recently, and I want to give my thoughts on the news. First of all, Christoph Waltz is back as Ernest Stavro Blofeld, reprising his role from Spectre, which I'm glad of, because I did like Waltz. I think his character could have been a little bit better, and I think the performance could have been better, and I think he's one of the weaker ones that we do see the face of. But Blofeld, I think we need to wrap up the story of Blofeld. Sorry for all the outside noises. Wrap up the story of Blofeld. I'm glad Christoph Waltz is coming back to help with that. I mean, the other films, they did change the actors each time, apart from the two, two guys actually in two films, From Us for Love and Thunderball. We had the body guy and a voice guy. I think one of them might have been the voice, was the same guy who played Professor Dent and Dr. No. Or was he the body? I think it might be the body, actually. Anthony Dawson. Something's going to happen for Three Eyes Only, but with two other people. And then the other films, apart from Bond 25, of course, with Christoph Waltz, have had an actor for their own films. So, face reveal with Donald Pleasance, Fiona Twice, Telly Savalas on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Charles Gray in Diamonds Are Forever, playing a second character in the franchise after playing a completely different character in Diamonds, Fiona Twice. He's both on Diamonds Are Forever, and Max von Sydow in the unofficial Bond film Never Say Never Again, and now Christoph Waltz in Spectre, and now coming back for Bond 25, which is still to be titled. It's still as yet untitled. As yet to be titled, or let's say, as currently untitled. Yeah, there we go. Currently untitled. Bond 25. So, yeah, so glad to see Christoph Waltz back, and I'm hoping that they can wrap up the character story from the last film. I'm personally not a fan of the whole Bond is Blofeld's adopted brother story. But I am glad that they're going to wrap up this story with the next film, hopefully, and the story that's been happening throughout since Casino Royale. Again, not really a big fan of linking all the films together. I mean, I don't mind the linking them all together, but in some places it didn't quite work, like making every single villain part of Spectre. Rami Malek his villain may or may not be Spectre, we'll see. The exception seems to be those Ugandan thugs, mercenaries from Casino, and maybe some other people at the start of that film, but they could all be part of Le Chiffre's plan and or Quantum and or Spectre. So, but Le Chiffre, Quantum, and Silver and Patrice, they were all part of Spectre, and I don't think they needed to have all of them be Spectre, part of Spectre. I mean, Quantum, yes, I think Quantum being part of Spectre or might have worked, but I think Le Chiffre should have been his own standalone villain, and Silver and Patrice should have been standalone villain, and that would have more, therefore made Skyfall more like the Goldfinger of the Daniel Craig films, where you've got first film with main villain, not may or may not be tied to this organisation, or in Doctor No's case it was, but maybe Le Chiffre has ties to Quantum. Second film, you've got this big organisation, they're doing stuff. Third film, standalone character and standalone villain in film. no reference to organisation. 4th film, the organisation is back in full force. 5th film, that's where we get to the big stuff with them. In this case, it's also may or may not do some Majesty's Secret Service stuff as well, which would be the 6th film in the originals. But we'll see how it goes with Bond 25. Like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing Christoph Waltz back and wrapping up the story there. So, and hopefully Waltz can give us a slightly better performance than in Spectre. I did like his performance, but I think he can do better. On to the other piece of news that I want to talk about, which is Lashana Lynch being, her character is the new 007, Agent 007, following James Bond's retirement at the end of Spectre, as we've seen. Now, I wanted to talk about this because, as would probably be predicted, a lot of people are moaning, bitching, and whining over absolutely nothing. The problem is, they think she's the new James Bond. That's probably, if they didn't read the articles, that's the headline of. I mean, the articles headlines would be saying Lashana Lynch is the new 007. And what people may have done is, if they haven't read the article, is think that she's the new James Bond, which is not true. I mean, or the person who would take over the James Bond mantle after Daniel Craig retires, dies, or just departs. The thing is, her agent is a completely new character who's been given the title of 007 following Daniel Craig's James Bond's retirement at the end of the previous film. Heck, there might even have been another 007 in between, and then they died or got captured, and so Lashana Lynch's character steps up. It's a bit of a similar situation to Forever and a Day, which came out last year, and it's a great book, by the way. I really recommend it. I'm probably going to have to review it one day. But this is this great story here. This story is basically sort of this is a prequel to Ian Fleming's Casino Royale, which I've also got, but it's underneath an entire pile of Bond books, so getting it out would cause a lot of trouble. In fact, it'd be easier to show you Casino Royale, and I'm seeing the 67 theme of film's theme. I don't know if it's showing you because it's all fuzzy. There you go, Casino Royale at the bottom. So, yeah, Forever and a Day serves as a prequel to Ian Fleming's Casino Royale. It's one of the continuation Bond novels. And, yeah, and it features 3 00 agents and the ones mentioned in Moonraker, the novel, 007, 009, and I think 0011, I think, if you permit me a few minutes. 7. Yeah, 11. 008 and 11 plus 7. And 007, of course, dies before the events of the book. So the 4th agent, who was going to be given the 00 status, which I believe was going to be offered, offered Give me a second, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, 008 and 011. Okay, so 008 and 011 and 007, and Bond was offered 009, but after 007's death, he decided to take up the mantle of 007 and therefore continue that agent's legacy. And so this story basically tells James Bond becoming 007 following the death of the previous agent. Otherwise, he would have been 009, for example. So, yeah, it can happen. This book proves it, and I'm sorry for quickly having a skin look and not cutting it out like I would normally, because I've got to do these one takes. So that's great. It's probably my favourite of the Bond continuation novels I've read. I've not read them all, but certainly one of my favourites. Okay, so yeah, it can happen, and I even have the theory that there could be an agent who replaced Bond, and they need to be replaced if something happens to them, which maybe there's another guy or a white girl or something, and then Lashana Lynch's character takes their position after they're gone, and Bond is also brought in to help fix them. Again, another reference would also be to the 1967 Casino Royale, when after James Bond in that film retires, before the events of that film, they gave the name and number to another guy. Possibly in a reference to Sean Connery's Bond, perhaps. And to be honest, that did give me a bit of a nasty theory earlier today, which another reason why I wanted to make this video. But I'll get around to that later. And but first, what could happen at the end of the film? And Alan Kalo did a great video on this. And that is what got me my thought that I had. He said it could go two ways. Firstly, that Bond could die, and Lashana Lynch's 007 could be the new James Bond going forwards. The alternative is that Bond could come back at the end and continue, whilst Lynch's character would serve as another 00 agent. The latter of which is one he prefers, if you listen to it. Of course, there is the possibility that the former could happen, but the next film could be a reboot, again, another reboot, and see another actor as James Bond, the 7th James Bond, instead of Lashana Lynch. But my thought is that they could actually go down that fucking codename theory. For those who aren't aware, and Calvin Dyson has done a fantastic video on this, the codename theory basically is a theory that each of the Bonds in the official Bond series, each actor is portraying a different James Bond agent, as opposed to one James Bond agent per timeline. So it basically suggests that each of the 5 actors of the original films are separate agents. So George Lazenby is not the same Bond as Sean Connery, for example, which is slightly supported by the "This Never Happened to the Other Fellow" line, which either feels more like a reference to Prince Charming and Cinderella, or as a funny gag to let the audience in. But some people might think it's a reference of Lazenby referring to Connery's Bond. Plus, then after that, you've got Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, and Pierce Brosnan. Not Daniel Craig, as he's set in a different timeline. So the first 5 Bonds, the theory basically thinks it suggests that each of them have their own different agents. Before we go any further, I'd like to say that I'd like to call out the codename theory by saying it's a bit bollocks. Calvin Dyson's video, it basically goes through quite a few good reasons, and I've seen a few other reasons. So there's quite a few. The best connection saying that all 5 are the same person is For Your Eyes Only's pre-title sequence, where Roger Moore Bonds goes to visit Tracy's grave, and Tracy was the wife of George Lazenby, his Bond. So that basically suggests that, plus a scene in Spy Who Loved Me with Anya at the bar, basically suggests that Roger Moore's Bond is the same one as Lazenby's, possibly also, and Connery's also the same if Diamonds Are Forever taking place after Majesty's, with Bond trying to find Blofeld. I do think more of the revenge story could have been involved in that film, but oh well. But basically, that makes the first 3 Bonds technically the same person, and there's also a reference in License to Kill. That makes the 4, and I think whilst the Brosnan films softly reboot the franchise, softly reboot the series, I think it is still the same timeline. So we can say all 5 Bond actors of the first 20 films are the same character. Then you get to Daniel Craig's, and they hard reboot it, and it's a completely different timeline. At my scary theory is that they might go down the codename theory route, or at least take a page from Casino Royale 1967 and give another agent the James Bond 007 title. So after James Bond himself dies or retires, 007 may also be given the name, Lashana Lynch's 007 may also be given the code name James Bond alongside 007, which is, like I said, something from the 1967 Casino Royale film. But that was more of a joke, to be honest. More of a tongue-in-cheek joke. So that's a scary thing, a scary thought I did have. To be fair, I don't think a woman should be James Bond. I think they should have a completely different character if they're going to do that. It's more for continuity reasons. I'm not against the character, well, not out of sexism, but out of characterism. I mean, there are characters out there who you can change the genders and the race without affecting their character or without affecting a established continuity. The Doctor is the best example because he/she is a time-traveling, regenerating alien who can basically be whoever they want. So they could be, well, we haven't had a black one yet, but we could have a black. We have had spoof ones who have done doctors of colour and of female doctors. Joanna Lumley actually beat Jodie Whittaker as being the first female incarnation by, was it 1999? About 18 years, unofficially. And Lenny Henry about a decade before that as the first black doctor, unofficially, of course. But it's the same logic. The logic works when it comes to the Doctor. It can be anybody. But characters that are pretty much established, it doesn't work. I mean, yeah, Calvin Dyson also did a sort of a video on should the next Bond be black in 2014. I think he's taken the video down, and he did sort of explain about should we have black actors playing white characters or white actors playing black characters in other mediums. The same logic pretty much works, and the same goes for gender. So yeah, there are some characters where you can have different. I'm not saying it because I'm against it. It's because how would you make it work? So whilst the characters like the Doctor or any other Time Lord, yeah, fine. But James Bond, when it comes to it, I think maybe a black Bond is fine. So long as the continuity is different. So if they do reboot it again, be the next film, different timeline to Craig's. But otherwise, new character, and the same for female. I think it should be a new character. The codename theory does suggest then that they can take the James Bond name without having to be born James Bond, and it's just a code name. But that does make me worry that then James Bond will now be just a bunch of agents under the code name as opposed to one guy as before. And also it would reopen that codename theory for the first 5 as well, which is been disproven by Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only, and License to Kill, and maybe also Diamonds Are Forever, perhaps. But yeah, I mean Connery's Bond doesn't. I don't think Connery's Bond goes on revenge for Lazenby's Bond's wife. I think Connery's Bond goes on revenge for his wife, which is also Lazenby's wife, because they're the same person, and therefore, so as I said, the first 5 Bonds are the same thing. But if they do go down this codename road, with like what's mentioned in Casino Royale 67, then that could reopen a ton of worms for those characters. Yeah, and I think a lot of people wouldn't like it. I mean, yeah, I want to see James Bond, the character, not a character taking up that other character's name as a code name. So yeah, and Daniel Craig's Bond is certainly rooted in, thanks to Skyfall and Spectre, definitely rooted as born James Bond, with the grave in Skyfall and the legal documents in Spectre. So yeah, that's why I thought of the Casino Royale 67 one. So that's what I'm mostly worried about. But Lashana Lynch playing a completely new character who is not going to be James Bond at the end. It's just 007, no James Bond 007. That's the code. That just given the code name 007, fine. And even if she, if Bond retires or dies at the end and she's 007, but they reboot the series in the next film, then that's also fine. Because if they reboot the series, then we'll be back with James Bond. It'll be another actor, another timeline, different to the Craig ones. Hopefully go down more of the route of the original films and just be separate films. Maybe one or two could be connected. Maybe you've got an overarching villain. Maybe Spectre can pop and Blofeld pop up a bit later on. But for the most part, mostly standalone adventures. Maybe they can reference each other now and again, like in the books, but not as a big plot point like in Spectre. So yeah, that's the only thing that how it could work is if she stays 007 at the end and Craig is not 007 at the end either. If James Bond retires or dies, then and they're rebooting it next film, then it's fine. But if she does take over the mantle, then I will be a bit worried. Excuse me. So, yeah, tell me what's your thoughts on this, and also on Christoph Waltz returning as Blofeld. Do you think it's a good idea? I think it's actually a good idea to experiment with this idea. It's just, how is it going to finish up? Is she going to take over as James Bond 007, or is she just going to stay as just 007? Will the series reboot after the next film, or will Bond stick around and we'll just get a new actor in for the next film, and we'll try to distance ourselves away but still stick in the same timeline? Depends if they kill off Blofeld as well in this film. If they kill off Blofeld in this film, then he can't come back in another film, and that was what I was worried about with the end of Spectre. But they did, they spared his life just at the end of that one. So I was a bit worried that if they killed Blofeld off there, they can bring him back in other films. So if they do kill off Blofeld here and they're not rebooting the series, then it's going to be a bit difficult to bring him back in later films, unless it's a source and I escaped bit, like in Diamonds Are Forever. He supposedly dies, but then he comes back in Pure Eyes Only. So they might do something like that, but a bit later on. But if it's a otherwise spare him. Sorry, don't kill him off. But if it is a reboot, then it would make sense killing him off. We're rebooting the next film, I should say. I'm actually not really wanting a reboot, but considering that this whole timeline is coming into an end, it does seem a bit likely. So we could be seeing the start of a new timeline in 2020. I want to say 2022 for the 60th anniversary, but I don't know how likely that is, considering it's taken 5 years for this film. So yeah, so hopefully what will happen, I mean, ideally we'd like Bond in this film to return to MI6 as 007, with Lynch's character given another 00. Then next film we get another actor in as Bond, and we just go from there. Standalone stories, maybe Spectre's still around, but or Blofeld's in prison or something. Maybe another Spectre story, and then maybe in that film or the film afterwards they can wrap up the Spectre story. They can stop with the Spectre for a while, like they did back after Diamonds Are Forever. But if it's going to be a completely reboot, then Spectre should be safer later on. Same for Blofeld. And if Lynch does take over the James Bond name as a code name as well as 007, well, yeah, that's it's a bit strange for starters. But second, we'll see. My belief is that we'll get James Bond, the person, back in the next film. Whatever happens at the end of of Bond 25, Bond 26, we'll have somebody as James. We'll have a guy called James Bond as Agent 007. So whatever happens in Bond 25, I think we will have a James Bond 007, and that James Bond is not his code name; it's his real name. And the same in License to Kill. If that was his code name, he would go by his Christian name, as Calvin Dyson put it. So, if Bond's Christian, let's say his his real name. So, yeah, if James Bond is the code name, then, so the next film would have James Bond, who's real name is James Bond, and the codename 007, and I think it will be a guy. I think it will probably, maybe even still be a white guy for the next film, even if it is a reboot. That's what I'm predicting, whatever happens, but I know some people will not like the idea of Lashana Lynch being the new 007 by the end of the film, if James Bond doesn't take it back. But if the series reboots, then I think it will be fine. If it doesn't reboot, then we've got the problem. Oh dear. But if Bond does come back and it either reboots, that makes it, well, it sort of makes sense in a way. If Bond comes back and it continues in that same continuity, then that's also fine. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on that. What do you think is the best outcome of those four? Personally, I would think Craig back as 007 and then continue, but same timeline, not reboot. But if we have to have a reboot, then I don't mind Lynch becoming the new 007 at the end of Bond 25, and then Bond 26 starts with a new James Bond played by someone else. It's a bit like with the end of The Dark Knight Rises, where can't remember his name, but it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character who reveals that he's Blaine, I believe is. Not sure, but he reveals his real name's actually Robin, and then at the end of Dark Knight Rises, he finds the Batcave, so it could imply he's going to be the new Batman, taking up after Bruce Wayne. And then 4 years later, we got Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice with a new Batman played by Ben Affleck in a completely different timeline. So we could have something like that. Lashana Lynch is just the new 007, not necessarily the new James Bond 007, unless they do assign that as the code name at the end. And then the reboot, we get another reboot, and then new timeline starts off with the Seventh Actor to play James Bond 007, with James Bond being the real name. That might actually be okay. Depends on whether we're told in advance of that. I mean, some people might lash out if that is how the film ends, and we're not told that Lynch will not be Bond in the next, or 007 in the next film. I think if that could work if the next one is a bit of a reboot. If we're going the same timeline, then Craig's Bond needs to be 007 again at the end. So yeah, see how it goes. Like I said, comment below what you want. I'm guessing most of you will not be wanting Lynch as 007 at the end, whatever happens in the film or whatever happens afterwards. But hopefully you'll be okay with her being 007 for the film, but not at the end, where you'll be hoping Craig takes it back, or at the very least a reboot afterwards, which is probably the most likely option, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.